Tucking his underlip and vigorously rubbing his hands together, with a glint in his eye, Captain Curry slapped his open palms on the card table. "I was just thinking, Bucky," said Captain Curry, lifting his chin, looking at Bucky askance. "I reckon you recall that royal frigate that nearly took us to meet Davy Jones." His eyes glazed and staring distantly, Captain Curry's lips became moist. For an instant, he sat still and tacit, the air from his flared nostrils filtering through his mustache. Arousing slowly like a reptile in the warmth of the sun, he peered pensively to Armand's eyes. "Aye, lad. It was the day I thought I would meet the devil himself. The summer of the northerly gales. And who could forget that summer? I, Captain Abel Curry, and me crew aboard the ship. The famous Skullduggery were being pursued by the Crown's enforcers, the King's Navy. They was coming at us large, about 10 knots. He saw his daughter lift her chin and scowl. "Father!" "Okay, maybe about 8 knots, give or take. But what I knew for sure was that we were outnumbered and outgunned. So I devised a cunning plan to outsmart the King's royal dogs. I ordered the crew to disguise the ship to look like a harmless fishing vessel." Captain Curry smiled, sat back, and lit an ornate pipe. Blue smoke wafted around his head. "Aye, me boyo. We threw overboard all the weapons, and the dreaded Jolly Roger, too. Be assured, lad, each was attached by ropes, which looked like fishing net downhaul lines. As the Navy ship approached, they was fooled by our disguise and lowered their guard. I seized the opportunity and gave the order to attack. We uphauled our hidden weaponry, surprised the dogs, and quickly gained the upper hand. The battle raged on for hours, but in the end, thanks to my using me melon, we emerged victorious. The Navy ship in flames sank to Neptune's briny realm. We cheered, we got drunk, and ran around. Sorry to report, lad, we all died." "Father!" shouted his daughter Abigail.
Welcome to Conversations with the Authors.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for pressing the play button. I'm your host, Daniel, with my co-hosts Daryl and Sandra. And what you just heard is an excerpt from the future, Daryl. This is an excerpt from your new book in the Nicholas series.
Yes, this is Nicholas and the Darkly Heart.
That was...
I was inspired
awesome.
to.
I really enjoyed. Yes, I really enjoyed that. The ending. Where died too. I was like, what? Yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Enjoyed that.
I'm glad you like that.
I think our readers.
We've got a lot more to go. That's just an excerpt.
Well,
So.
I mean, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you were curious, you've been following along, and you wanted to know where Nicholas is going, where the story, where the series is going, where this world is evolving to, there's your taste of it.
Just a taste. I kind of took it out of the middle of the book somewhere, so just...
Yeah. I mean, that's usually where the flavor is, So how, which leads you to my first question, how do you approach world building in sci-fi novels like this?
Oh, in sci-fi novels like this, I tell you, it's really a meticulous process. Sandra and I start by trying to create a strong foundation for fictional worlds. You have to have that strong foundation, and it include geography, history, culture, and magical systems. Right? Do all of that. We try to delve into the details.
Okay.
Yeah, and we want to consider all kinds of social structures, politics, maybe even the impact of supernatural elements. This you have to be comprehensive, because the comprehensive approach helps us craft. These. It's got to be these immersed and believable worlds.
Right. And you mentioned magical systems, and Nicholas is full of magic. And before I get to your answer, I want to see what Sandy says with her answer. How did you approach magical systems? Like, how did you just off the top of your head? How did you? You came up with the story from the beginning. How did you start with magical systems?
Well, first I started out with a location.
Okay.
I had a location that had a particular appearance, and in that appearance I had decided on which of those things do I want to have the magic.
Okay.
And
so that's like establishing the rules, right?
Right.
That's establishing the rules. And then I wrote an outline to that particular location.
Right.
So the outline kind of puts limitations.
Right. And
I think on it.
So that's how Sandy approaches magic. And do you approach it in a similar manner? Do you have thoughts on that, or?
Well, I do, and I just want to make sure that when I do that everything is consistent, and because we're working within a framework,
right?
A framework that we've constructed, and we want to make sure that we get a sense of balance, and we don't want any plot holes.
Right. No.
We don't want to fall into that.
Plot holes are not good.
So
no.
we have to have that logical framework. It enhances the story, drives the narrative.
Right.
Wouldn't you say?
Which is your sort of mantra when writing is it has to move the story. It has to
we've been saying it has to
right.
drive the story, right?
So
and all of my little sub outlines have to fit the outline of the story.
Right.
So I have outlines for what the characters look like, for what their powers are, for what their consequences are, what the story consequences are.
Right.
And when you see these characters, when you're crafting these magic systems and what works and what doesn't work, do you see the characters crafting these spells and such in your head, or are you crafting these spells? Are you sort of in the skin of the characters, for a better term, crafting the spells? Like, how does that work in your head?
That's interesting.
Because when I craft characters, when I'm writing magic, I always imagine myself sort of doing the spells. I'm in a POV. I'm in a first-person view, perspective, crafting this wizardry. Whereas others like to see the action happen. As you say when you write, Daryl, you sort of like you're watching a movie.
Right.
So I wonder, when you're doing it, how are you?
It's interesting, because when I do it, I'm sitting in the theater in my mind, watching the character on screen.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm directing the character, but I'm also watching it too in my head.
Right. But as the sort of God-type character, being the author, you get to do that. You get to be in all perspectives. So
perspectives, as we say in writing, the through lines. So we get to see the overall through line. We're on that hill, as they say, looking down over the story and seeing the various stories through those through lines. Every character has a through line. The entire story has a through line, and we have to keep up with that.
I know it sounds sometimes as though we're asking some of the similar questions, but I think they're important, especially for the new viewers and listeners who are following us. And we talk about sitting in, a movie and watching the screen as you're creating the story, and it's immersive. That's weird. Immersed in these big, 120-foot screens. So when you're creating the world like this? How do you approach the task of engaging and immersive descriptions in your writing so that when people are reading it, it feels like they're watching a movie?
Well, I think, and we just have to keep in mind that someone is going to be reading this, and we really want to appeal to their senses, their emotions, and in our style of writing through the vivid descriptions, right?
And that's where, as a couple, the writing is very cooperative, because I'll write a character, and when I write a character, it's as though I'm a projector, and I'm projecting it onto a claymation type of character, but my projection is activating that character. And when I get finished describing it, I hand it to your dad, and then he says either it seems plausible, it's totally ridiculous and won't work at all, or he'll tweak it.
Well, you know what, and tweaking for me it can mean many things, but one of the things I love to do is tweak the language.
Yes.
And I like to use that evocative language,
Right.
you know, and my wife makes sure that I use the sensory details too as well. She's always asking me, what does it smell like? What does it feel like? So,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
And-
those
and
are, yeah.
What does it taste like? What do the smells taste
Oh, yeah,
like?
yeah. And if you listen
know,
to the previous podcast, you were here, so you heard it.
Right.
But one of our super fans was saying that she liked the sights and the smells and the tastes of it too, and that's all part of telling the story. That's all about being immersive. I think.
It's like in the new book, I have a character that you taste a smoky storm coming first, as
Right.
if there's a forest fire and the
You know,
fumes are preceding it.
You know, and some of that is really pulled from real life too, because we have conditions in humans that are called synesthesia,
Synesthesia.
and when people can see sounds and they can hear sights and
Hear taste.
So yeah,
taste.
their senses are mixed in a way, and most of us are like that a little bit, believe it or not, because if we see drawings, for instance, that very sharp and pointed drawings, you know, we might say, well, that's the bad character. If we see rounded drawings, just these amorphous drawings, we might say, well, that's the soft and friendly character.
I
That's
think
kind of
also-
synesthetic.
Right, and I
Right.
think so too, in the same sense with music. We hear music like our intro by Alexander Nakarada, which, thank you so much. It's provocative. It makes you...
That's why they have music in the movies.
Right. It's
right.
you excited, you know.
It evokes emotion.
And, you know, what else evokes emotion is dialogue, you know. And, you know, if you... Again, the story you wrote at the beginning was very exciting. So I've got to ask you, how do you approach crafting believable dialogue for your sci-fi fantasy characters? Because I imagine I was sitting in this sort of room of this boat.
Part of that is
listening.
listening to all the conversations around you and incorporating them, mixing them.
Well, yeah, you listen to a lot of people,
Right.
and you hear a lot of people, a lot of different types of people talk, and they talk in different ways.
Right.
And when you want to make a dialogue believable, you have to, in my mind at least,
Right.
I sit back and pretend in my mind that I'm talking to somebody,
Right.
You know, and I note their particular way of talking and emoting their emotions. It's like when that in the intro. That reading that I did is from the second book that I'm writing now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just emphasize that was dialogue. And so...
You have to finish it, because now
Right.
I need to know what happened.
Right. So, and in this instance, I have two individuals who are trying to get passage on a ship.
Right.
and the only ship they could get out of Dodge on was a pirate ship. And earlier in the story, the pirate told them, he said, "We're going to play a game of cards. If you win, you get to stay." Right. So I had to come up with dialogue, and this pirate broke into an interlude about what happened to him because he likes the small talk. Right. In the past, and
right.
he had a captive audience.
So it's things like speech pattern and word choice.
All right, exactly.
Like exactly.
So and as a writer, it's okay to be sort of a people watcher, you know. When you're talking with your friends, or you're hearing your coworkers, or you're out in the park, sort of don't be a creeper. Because don't do that. But just sort of take note of how people interact, body language, little words here and there, laughters, looks. All of those are important to making authentic, realistic characters.
Also, the way conversations are changed and distorted in areas like the subway or an open field that echoes.
Right.
Or
And as a writer, one of the things you certainly want to do is you want to get inside the head of your characters. You don't want everybody to sound like you.
Right.
Everybody's got to sound different.
Right.
Because people are different, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's a matter of going against the type, playing against your typical responses. Like you say, playing the bad guy, it's sort of, opening that can of worms a little bit,
right.
and, letting it sort of wreak havoc in a way. You go from being, Santa Claus to, Dexter. There's like, but,
or like that character that I wrote, Captain Curry,
right,
who's really not a completely nice guy.
And sometimes if you've ever had a horrible boss that you just you wish you had a time machine,
right?
You could just take that experience, those I wish I could have done this to him, and write that into a character that is atypical what you would have done because you're sane.
Does anybody remember Austin Powers?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So Dr. Evil was actually supposedly Lorne Michaels.
Yes.
So that was the boss of that actor.
So in that, how themes? Okay, they're an integral part of storytelling, right? So
Sure.
how do you approach themes and messages in sci-fi and fantasy? Like when you're trying to get these things across, how do you do that? What's the best way to approach that, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, really, you've got to
start with your outline.
Yeah, start with your outline.
So you know where your story drive's going.
Right.
And the theme has to resonate with the personality, and then you get to explore things through the experience of the characters.
Right. Because it not just has to resonate with... we have a new puppy. If you hear that through the microphone, there's a new puppy. She was sleeping, but now she's awake. So,
okay.
And she, in dialogue, would probably be telling you maybe she's hungry or sleepy, and it has to resonate with your audience, right? They have to be able to connect with it. They have,
with dialogue, we really, really want to aim to provoke thought and spark discussion.
Right.
Kind of like what we're doing right now. But
right.
So you may even have a club who read a book. They read a book, and they'll have a discussion.
And the interesting part of dialogue in a science fiction book is that your characters don't necessarily speak the language that you do in the way you do, or even in a format that could be recognized as worldly.
You reminded me of the trolls in the story. That spoken rhyme? Remember those? They were cute guys, but you had to listen closely to get their meaning because they spoke in rhyme.
What about the light sprites that speak in pulses and hums and clicks?
Okay. Well, you'd have to be familiar with that to be, and some of our characters were, to be able to communicate with them.
Right, and to provoke thought and dialogue and conversation.
Yes.
And sort of connect with your audience. And if you'd like to connect with us and our authors, you can pick up the books at troopbooks.com. You can visit our Instagram, our Facebook, and our TikTok at troopbooks.com. If you go to troopbooks.com, you'll land on the author page with Ewing's Publishing House, where you can pick up a hardcover or a softcover. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. There's so many more questions to go, and I hope that I can talk with you all next time on Conversations with the Authors.